Well, ladies and gentlemen, a long overdue interview / discussion with my dear friend, former ambassador to Israel from the United States under President Trump, David Friedman. He's got a fantastic new book out, One Jewish State, The Last Best Hope to Resolve the Israeli-Palestinian Conflict. And before we get to that, Mr. Ambassador, you spent a lot of time in Israel. Tell us what's going on the ground with Hezbollah and Israel and all the rest of it.
Well, Mark, thanks for having me. Of course, always great to be with you. Well, look, you know what's happening on the ground now? What's happening on the ground now is Israel, thank God, is taking off the handcuffs that have been placed upon it by the Biden-Harris administration, and is finally fighting back against Hezbollah that's been shooting rockets at it for the last 11 months. 8,000 missiles have been fired by Hezbollah in the northern Israel. It cost 60,000 Israelis to be displaced from their homes. They haven't been home in 11 months. They got people living all around the country in makeshift housing because they can't go home because of this ridiculous assault by Hezbollah. As to which, there's no territorial dispute or anything. They just started a war against Israel because they wanted to act in sympathy with Hamas. And for the last 11 months, Biden and Harris, and Blinken, all they wanted was there just to be quiet. And so they kept begging Hezbollah to stand down and begging Israel to stand down. And meanwhile, these rockets were being shot at Israel every single day. And finally, this past week, Israel said, enough. Like, we have 60,000 people that can't go home. We have to do something about this. And of course, it began with when they were able to target this guy Shuker, who was responsible for murdering 12 beautiful children playing soccer. So they got him, in a very precise attack. Then they this incredible beeper, assault, where the head of Hezbollah thought that that iPhones were going to be tracked, but beepers were too primitive to be tracked. So he gave his top 2,000-3,000 terrorists beepers, and of course Israel was able to manufacture them and booby trap them, and they all exploded and reduced the capacity of Hezbollah dramatically. Then Israel went and killed 12 of the leaders of Hezbollah who were planning an assault in the Galilee, and now they're just hammering. Wherever there's a rocket launcher, they're attacking it. And Israel finally has changed the balance of power in the north. They have, Hezbollah is completely on the run. This is a massive opportunity, a massive victory or impending victory, not just for Israel, but for the whole world, for the region. I mean, this is the Iran's most significant proxy. It's also, Hezbollah is also the largest army of any non-state actor in the world. So, if this continues to go the way it's going, it's just an incredible positive development for the world. Of course, Biden is trying to stop it every day. They're telling them they have to have a ceasefire. This is not the way to do it. But the reality is Israel's kind of fed up. They said, you know what, enough of this nonsense. We're going to defend our citizens. And thank God they've taken off the gloves. They've gone after one of the worst regimes, one of the worst terrorist organizations in the world. By the way, that is responsible for the murder of more than 200 Marines in 1983, as well as 60 members of the Beirut embassy in the same year. So these are people that have American blood on their hands. And Israel's finally fighting back with the kind of strength and power and ingenuity that Israel has, and it's about time.
Yeah, and the United States is not doing anything with Iran but funding it and arming it. And when it comes to Hezbollah, I mean, David Friedman, if 8,000 or 9,000 rockets were shot into the United States by any neighboring country, would we put up with this? I mean, why is it that the Jews in Israel are the only people on the face of the earth that are supposed to tolerate this?
It's just insanity. I mean, I think it's coming to an end. I think that it's coming to an end because the people of Israel, I mean, make no mistake, and you know this as well as I do, the people of Israel are some of the bravest, most committed, most patriotic people of any people in the world. They're one of I'm tremendously proud of everything that they've done, and they're like our great military in America. They just do incredible stuff, and they're demanding that the government finally just lay down the gauntlet and say enough. We're not a punching bag. And it doesn't matter how much we want to have good relationships with the United States. You can't subject your citizens to daily assaults, that force them out of their homes. It's just not, it's untenable. It's unthinkable. So fortunately, I mean, I'm seeing in the last 2 weeks, I'm starting to see, I hope it continues. I mean, we're not far from over yet, but I'm starting to see this begin to turn in a way which, fortunately, it took way too long. This could have been over months ago. Half a year ago, this could have been over if it weren't for the limitations placed upon Israel by the United States. But it's coming to an end and can't come soon enough.
So you've written a book, One Jewish State, and people might say, wait a minute, one Jewish state? Is this a two-state solution? What does the ambassador, David Friedman, have in mind in his fantastic new book, One Jewish State?
Well, I can tell you the last thing I have in mind is a two-state solution. I mean, what this book does is two things. The first part of the book is to make it clear, and it should be clear to everybody without saying it, but the two-state solution is dead, and it has to remain dead and buried. And I don't care how many times the Democratic Party comes out and says it's the only solution, or the UN says it's the only solution. It is a final solution for the Jewish people in the land of Israel. So, and how do we know this? We know this because Gaza, was devoid of Jews for 18 years. Prime Minister Sharon evacuated all the Jews from Gaza in 18 years ago. There hasn't been a soldier with a boot on the ground in Gaza since after October 7th. The Palestinians living in Gaza have their own territory, beautiful beachfront, western-facing Mediterranean beachfront. They could have built hotels and schools, and they got billions of dollars from the UN, regrettably from America, from all the administrations other than the Trump administration. What did they do with all the money? Did they build schools or highways or infrastructure? No, they built the most elaborate network of terror tunnels in the world and weapons of mass destruction that they aimed at Israel, at civilians in Israel. So they failed. They had a test, and they failed. And they failed miserably, and they showed that they're incapable of governing. And by the way, they elected Hamas. It's not like Hamas took it over. They elected Hamas as their leaders. And by the way, if there was an election now in Judea and Samaria, or as some people call the West Bank,
they'd elect them again.
Also, they went 80% of the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria, or as some people call the West Bank, 82% of them said that they support Hamas. Everything they did, they were exhilarated, they were excited, they felt vindicated. This is what people are saying. These are the people that the world says to Israel, give them a platform, give them a stake, give them a platform to destroy Israel. So that's one part of the book, which is we can't have a two-state solution. But then what I do is I think I'm the only person, certainly the only American with any, foreign policy credentials who's ever said this, which is, okay, if no two-state solution, then what? And the then what is, let's look around this region and who's actually qualified to have sovereignty over this area. It's not Lebanon or Syria. It's not Jordan or Egypt. They're all failed states. It's not Hamas. It's not the Palestinian Authority, even though people say they're the better Palestinians. They pay, as you know, they have a pension system where they incentivize Palestinians to murder Jews. You kill one Jew, you get a pension. You kill two Jews, you get a bigger pension. It's the most cynical, abusive, manipulation of people to become terrorists in the world.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very careful about the authors that I bring on and the books that they write, but this is a killer book, One Jewish State, and I want to strongly encourage you to grab your copy. You can go to Amazon.com. You can get it tomorrow. I have it linked to all my platforms, all the social platforms. It's by a strong supporter of America, of Israel, a confidant of President Trump's, and he and others working with President Trump were the ones who brought the Abraham Accords and peace to the Middle East. And these are the kinds of people we need to learn from. These are the kinds of people we need to learn from. Ambassador David Friedman, who is also a good friend of the family, as is his family a good friend of the family. One Jewish State. So, Ambassador David, you were telling us there is one way for one state. Go right ahead.
Sure. So, and again, Mark, thank you for your very kind words. So, look, you look around the region and you see that this area, Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, it's surrounded by failed states.
By the way, I often call it the East Bank now. The East Bank of Israel. Can I call it the East Bank? Just for the fun of it,
From the Green Line, we can do that. Yeah.
I'm just messing around. Okay.
Yeah, we can do it. Yeah. So look, you look at all the countries that surround Judea and Samaria. They're all failed states. Or you've got Hamas or Islamic Jihad or the Palestinian Authority that are these terrorist regimes that are infecting the area. None of them are remotely qualified. They would just radicalize the area further and create a platform to destroy Israel. So my thesis is that, let Israel take it over. They already have military control of the area. Why? For three reasons. Number one, Israel has a track record of empowering its Arab minority. 20% of the citizens of Israel today are Arabs. Israel doesn't get credit for this, but 20% of the Israeli citizens are Arabs. Israel has 4 or 5 elite universities. Of those elite universities, more than 20% of the students are Arabs. Christian Arabs in Israel have the highest standard of living anywhere, including the Jews. Christian Arabs have the highest standard of living. Arabs in Israel have ascended to the highest levels of business, commerce, medicine, law, finance. I mean, that's what Israel does for its minority. So Israel has the best track record of exporting those values into Judea and Samaria and helping to de-radicalize the Palestinians. That's number one. Number two, legally, Israel has the best claim to this area. I mean, this was the Pompeo doctrine that Mike Pompeo and I worked on when we were in the State Department, but it goes back 100 years. I mean, this area was earmarked by the League of Nations, by the San Remo Declaration, to the Jewish people. Okay, that's sort of, it's not like Israel's taken anything that it doesn't already own. It has the best claim. Our own government, back when it wasn't infected with Israel haters, our own government, led by a guy named Eugene Rostow, who went on to become the dean at the Yale Law School, he said that this land belongs to Israel, belongs to the Jewish people. So we're only taking what we... And then the last thing, and maybe the most important thing, this territory, Judea and Samaria, this is the land of the Bible. This is where the kings ruled. This is where the prophets preached. And Mark, I went and checked. 2,000 copies of the Bible sell every hour in America. 20 million copies of the Bible are bought in America every year. It still matters to a lot of people. And this land, whether it's from the top, from Nazareth to Shiloh to Bethel to Jerusalem to Bethlehem to Rachel's tomb to Hebron to Beersheba, this is where the Bible took place. These are where all the stories. By the way, the New Testament as well as the Old Testament. This is where the values of the Jewish people, of the people of the Christian faith, the Judeo-Christian values that made America, that inspired the founders to create America in all its glory. This is the land where it all started. This is the wellspring of all the values of America. And you know what? If Israel doesn't keep it, the Palestinians will destroy every last remnant of any sign of a connection to the 3,000-year-old history of the Jewish people and the 2,000-year-old history of the Christian faith. It'll all go away. And you know what? I see people, I served for 4 years in Israel, and I, even though it was against the rules of the State Department when I got there, I went to Judea and Samaria against their rules, and I changed the rules. And when I got there, I saw, people would come, people from all over the world, people of all faiths, they would come there, and they left so inspired, because what it does is it takes your faith and it anchors it in reality. It anchors it in fact. It anchors it in actual events that you learned about, but you now can prove actually happened. And so this territory is so important to the entire world. And the idea that Israel would be forced to surrender it to a bunch of people who've never had a country, right, who've never shown any ability whatsoever to run a country, whatever opportunities they've been given, they've not only squandered, but they've turned them into terror states. The Palestinian Authority is corrupt, and it's got no human rights record and no freedom of speech or religion. I mean, this is not what you want. This is, America should not want its fingerprints on a Palestinian state, and yet it is the mother's milk of the Democrat Party. This is what they believe is the only way to solve the problem. So we have to come up with a counter-narrative, and that's what I'm trying to do here. No one's done it. There's no book out there that says, instead of giving this all to the Palestinians, why shouldn't Israel keep it? It's entitled to it legally. It's entitled to it biblically. It has the ability, the skill, and the will to run it in a way that will bring dignity and prosperity to everybody who lives there. Why wouldn't Israel be the right choice for it? And yet no one's really saying that. And we have to change the narrative, to something much more in keeping with our biblical values and our common sense.
The book is One Jewish State. You get it at Amazon.com or any of my social sites. It's on our platforms by Ambassador David Friedman. You know, David Friedman, the Palestinians have absolutely no claim to any of this land, do they? So my question is this. The so-called Palestinians have no ancestral claim to any of this area, do they? I mean, in 1965, the name was created by Arafat. I mean, we know the more recent history, but they don't have any claim to a country, let alone to what is today the state of Israel.
Well, look, number one, there's never been a nation of Palestine ever at any time. It was just a description of some territory. It was called Palestine, by the Romans 2,000 years ago because they had won their war against the Jews. It used to be called Judea, and the Romans wanted to humiliate the Jews, so they named it after the rival of the Jews, the Philistines. There were no Arabs living there at the time. 2,000 years ago, there were no Arabs living in this part of the world. The Arabs didn't come until 600 years later. With the advent of Islam. So the origins, there are no origins that relate to an Arab nation. The Palestine was just a landmass. If you remember Mark Twain's book, The Innocents Abroad. He went to visit this area, and he was shocked by how desolate it was. There was nobody there. Nobody wanted to be there. It was a place full of brush and malaria. And poverty, and then when the first the Zionist movement came in the middle of the 19th century, they made it bloom, they made it prosperous, and all of a sudden, there was this Palestinian. I call it a brand. I mean, the Palestinians are a brand, and what's most important about I think this, Mark, is that if you go through the Palestinians, whether Arafat or his successor. They don't spend 5 minutes thinking about what kind of a country do we want? Do we want it to be a democracy, a republic? Are we going to have freedoms? Are we going to have a transparent economy? What are we going to build? How are we going to build it? The entirety of the Palestinian Liberation Organization is not to liberate the Palestinians; it's to destroy Israel. It only has if you look at their charters, and I have the charters attached to the back of my book. It's only about destroying Israel and killing Jews. There is no movement for a Palestinian nation. The nation is a vehicle, just simply a vehicle to expel the Jews from their biblical homeland. So, but what? This narrative is lost on the world. They become, the darlings of the United Nations. They now have a seat in the General Assembly, which is an incredibly insulting to Israel. And they have a leader who's in the 19th year of his 4-year term. He was elected for 4 years. They're not looking to build a state. If they want to build a state, they'd have an election. The guy was elected, and he hasn't had an election now for 15 years since his term expired, because he knows he'd lose. And so this is what we're dealing with. And they get tons of money from the world. I mean, and I think people should understand. Trump cut them off completely. UNRWA, the PA. Iran, all the sources, he cut them off completely. And you know what? There weren't any wars. Nobody invaded anybody. It was only when the money got turned back on again, they had the wherewithal to start trouble, to start this war. So when Donald Trump says this wouldn't have happened if I was still there, he's absolutely right, because he cut off the flow of funds at every point where there could be funds to build rockets and to build tunnels. He cut it all off, and he was right, and he was proven right.
Well, David Friedman, you are a fantastic patriot. You did a fantastic job as ambassador to Israel. David Milstein, my stepson, worked with you. Was very proud to work with you. And folks, our families are very close, and because these are good people. And I want to thank you for everything you've done. Now, America, you hear how brilliant this man is about history, about current events. And all these events affect every American. Every American. Look what's going on in the Middle East as I speak. One Jewish State. It is available right now on Amazon.com, any of my social platforms. I want to encourage you to grab a copy. When a book comes out early like this, it's well discounted, so now's the time to grab it. It's a great gift. Hanukkah is not that far away, by the way. Christmas, too. And this is a book not just for Jews. This is a book for Christians. This is a book for anybody who's interested, number one, in history, number two, in current events, and number three, in a fantastic, actually a brilliant resolution to what is now taking place, at least in part of the Middle East. The book again, One Jewish State, Amazon.com. David Friedman, God bless you, my friend, and thank you.
God bless you, Mark, and your family, too. Give them all my best. Thank you so much.
You bet. Take care.